Hey there, and welcome to IKTV. The 80s were great, weren't they? Great hair, great music, and great kids' TV. If you were an 80s kid, though, you couldn't just watch whatever you wanted when you wanted. There was no internet. If you were lucky, you might have cable. And by the end of the decade, possibly some movies on VHS. Still, there was a plethora of shows out there that those kids who grew up in the 80s loved. Here are some of our favorite shows that children tuned into when they aired in the 1980s. We have created a top 10 and would love to know if you agree with our decision. So please let us know in the comments if you agree or disagree. And if you think there is a kids' TV show from the 80s that we have missed, please tell us. So let's get started. At number 10, it's He-Man and the Masters of the Universe. By the power of Grayskull, Prince Adam of Eternia could transform himself into He-Man to take on the evil Skeletor. Sure, He-Man only existed to sell toys. It was the 80s. We didn't think that was bad yet. And kids weren't complaining about the superhero with a cool tiger for a pet, fighting a skeleton man. They only made 2 seasons of He-Man that ran from 1983 to 1985. But they produced 120 episodes that aired in reruns for a while. This show also spawned a terrible movie starring Dolph Lundgren in 1987, which has an IMDb rating of 5.4 or a definite don't watch. At number 9 we have The Real Ghostbusters. Ghostbusters was a massive hit in 1984, and naturally, they wanted to capitalize on it. Why not make things a little more kid-friendly? And also, why not make Slimer a friend of the Ghostbusters? The reason the show had to be called The Real Ghostbusters was because a different company was trying to make some cash off of Ghostbusters by making an animated show based on a forgotten 70s TV show called The Ghostbusters. Since they had the rights, The Real Ghostbusters was born. Kids figured it out. The series ran from 1986 to 1991. It had new actors voicing the roles of Peter, Egon, and Ray. Interestingly, Ernie Hudson auditioned for the voice acting role of his own character, Winston, but was beaten to the role by comedian Arsenio Hall. At number 8, we have The Muppet Show. Technically, The Muppet Show only aired original episodes until 1981. However, that's still the 80s, so it counts. Also, if you were around in the 80s, you remember the reruns of the Muppets variety show that aired for years on end. Kermit and the gang were a staple of TV for kids for the entirety of the 80s. Plus, we could throw in Muppet Babies, the animated show that began in 1984. Number 7, Punky Brewster. If nothing else, Punky Brewster taught a group of children not to go into refrigerators. Apparently, the Joker never learned that lesson. Punky was one of many orphan children of 80s television. She was literally abandoned while her mom was shopping. And yet, Punky remained optimistic and cheerful, making her a delightful TV friend for kids of the 80s. Number 6. Jim and the Holograms. Technically, the show was officially just called Jim, but everybody knows it as Jim and the Holograms. Hey, let's give the backing band some love, since they aren't actually holograms. The show is about a woman named Jerrica who, with the help of a holographic computer, becomes Jim, the biggest music star in the world. Also, there is an evil band called the Misfits for some reason. Number 5. Garfield and Friends. What kid who doesn't like school couldn't relate to Garfield's disdain for Mondays? Garfield as a character is a little repetitive for an adult, but kids don't mind a little repetition, as any parent who has had to watch a movie 100 times in a row can tell you. Garfield and Friends ran from 1988 to 1995, and, like a few others on this list, spawned an awful movie version. In fact, Garfield has the dubious honor of having 2 poorly received movies. The 2004 version with Bill Murray as the titular character, and in 2024, which starred Chris Pratt and Samuel L. Jackson. Now we are getting near the top, with DuckTales at number 4. Nobody went on adventures quite like the crew from DuckTales. When you've got money like Scrooge McDuck, you can afford to travel the globe, perhaps to get some more treasures and accrue some more wealth. Of course, the show wasn't just about a wealthy Scottish duck on the move. He had his nephews Huey, Dewey, and Louie with him naturally. This Disney classic ran from 1987 to 1990. At number 3, it's The Smurfs. The Smurfs as characters existed in comics prior to the 80s, but the famed cartoon that spawned their popularity in the United States basically ran the entire course of the 80s. The little blue creatures with the very explanatory names got in adventures and taught us some lessons. They also said some fun and eventually joined our ever-expanding list of kids' TV shows that spawned awful live-action movies. 2 of them. Narrowly missing the number 1 spot, it's Inspector Gadget in second place at number 2. Why did Inspector Gadget stay employed? The man with machine parts was truly incompetent. At least his daughter Penny and their dog Brain was around to help him. Not that Gadget ever figured it out. Hey, as long as Dr. Claw and MAD didn't get a win, who could complain too much? Inspector Gadget started in 1983 and was still going in some format 40 years later in 2023. Of course, there was the obligatory bad movie. This was one of the worst, with the 1999 Matthew Broderick film achieving an inexcusable 4.2 on IMDb. And here we are at number 1. And we have given the honor to Fraggle Rock. We know the theme song is already in your head. This show, a Jim Henson creation, focused on the adventures of the Fraggles and the Doozers and their adventures living underground. It was a whole new world of Muppets, replete with catchy songs. Fraggle Rock aired from 1983 to 1987 and is arguably one of Henson's greatest shows. Apple TV brought it back in Fraggle Rock, Back to the Rock in 2022. There was also a well-received animated series in 1987, and thankfully no live-action atrocity in sight. Well, that's it for our top 10 kids' TV shows of the 1980s. We hope you enjoyed it. We would love to hear your thoughts in the comments section. Thanks for watching, and don't forget to subscribe to our channel.